All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you once again for joining me here in our Bhagavad-gita Satsang. And I am very, very happy to be joined this evening by Śivani Howe, who you are now unmuted, Śivani, and I will give a proper introduction in just a moment. So hold on to your hats while I go through a little bit of housekeeping. All right. So for those of you who are new to the satsang, welcome. Thank you very, very much for being here. It's always a great pleasure to have you here with me and an honor to have you spending some of your time with us. So from a housekeeping standpoint, you can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options in the upper right-hand corner. You don't need to worry about your mic or your video camera because you can see and hear us, but we cannot see or hear you unless you use the Q&A box, which I will probably see faster than the chat window. So if you would like to make yourself heard or your presence known, if you have a question or a comment at any point in the proceedings, then by all means, please register your question in the Q&A box or comment. Last week, we covered almost the end of chapter 10. Krishna is the best in all categories, the essence of all wonderful things. We spoke about Krishna and qualities he identifies as feminine and also identifies with as himself. And Krishna in poetry and seasons. We got to verse 35. And tonight, something completely different. We are going to have our special guest, Sannyasi Śivani Howe. We're going to speak about the Bhagavad-gita, but through different eyes. And what I mean by that is that we have been discussing Bhagavad-gita through the lens of the Vaishnava Sampradayas or the Vaishnava lineages. And Śivani is looking at the Bhagavad-gita through the lens of a different lineage, and we will discuss her particular lineage, where she's coming from, and then we'll see what's the same and what's different and what overlaps and such like that. We're going to talk about karma yoga and bhakti yoga, karma yoga and meditation, and we'll talk a little bit about what it's like to live in an ashram. We'll actually talk about quite a few other things as well, and we'll see how much we get to. Meanwhile, I'm going to take a poll, and I am going to ask everyone who is in attendance to please raise your hand right now if you see us both on the screen. All righty. Thank you very much. So I've got that part right. Now let's see if I had the other part right. While I was just speaking, were you seeing the screen and me or both of us? If you were just seeing me, please raise your hand. Okay. Were you seeing just Śivani? You were seeing both of us. Yay, okay. Well, thank you very much. I think I may know how to drive this jalopy. We shall see. All right, by way of introduction, Sannyasi Śivani Howe is a karma sannyasin of the Saraswati lineage. She is the spiritual director and head teacher, principal resident of the Ishtadev Niwas Ashram and Yoga Center situated in the beautiful foothills of the Purcell Mountains in British Columbia. She is also the author of The Yoga of Remembrance, a collection of stories framed by yogic themes and teachings. So, Śivani, welcome, and thank you very much for joining me here this evening on our Bhagavad-gita Satsang.
Namo Narayan. Thank you for having me.
All right. Now I'll have to take another poll and just make sure everyone hears Śivani. please raise your hand if you can hear her. Yes, okay, good. That's our last technical check. And so now we know that everything is working. Śivani, tell us a little bit, for starters, just so we can get to know you, a little bit about yourself, how you came to yoga and to teach yoga, and a little bit about your lineage.
Well, I have always had some sort of connection to Mother India. I think you brought up in a conversation the other day that I found a photo of myself in a sari at 8 years old. My next door neighbors were Indian, as I grew up in suburbia in New Zealand. And our next door neighbors were Indian, and they would go to these crazy, exotic rituals and things like that. And one day they said that they would take me, and they dressed me up in a sari, and they took me to this hall, and there was this pillar in the middle of the hall, and it was just floor to ceiling flowers, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And all night we danced and we sung and we ate, and we danced and we sung and we ate. And it was my first real memory of the culture of the tantric philosophy, the Vedantic philosophy, and of course through their eyes, Hinduism. And I didn't really have any other connections with the Indian culture. And then when I was in my early 20s, I got really sick with endometriosis, and my surgeon was like, "You're really stressed out. You should try yoga." So my mom, right? And so my mama, she lived in the other end of the country. She couldn't really do anything to help me at that time. So she said, "I'll pay for you to go for a month of yoga on Tuesday nights if you promise to go." And so I did. And I went to, where a lot of people start. It was an Ashtanga course and a Mysore class eventually. And there was just something there, and it was really beautiful. And then I realized as I got further into the understanding yoga, like years later, that while I was in university, my big assignments in university, I have a Bachelor of Spatial Design, and so I was doing color psychology and ended up studying the chakras. I had to do a 3-dimensional aid to relaxation, and when everybody was doing chairs and pillows, I was designing meditation chambers, so even though I'd never meditated a moment in my life. These were just things that were coming out of me, things that I just found haphazardly. So I didn't really get into yoga beyond a Saturday morning asana class until I moved to Toronto in 2003. And there I met a teacher, not just somebody who was facilitating an asana class, but an actual yoga teacher. And she changed my world. She completely and utterly changed my perspective of reality as I knew it, and blew my brain. And I've never looked back. I just haven't looked back at all. So 2006 was my first trip to India, and I've been every year since. And yeah, here we are.
And here we are. So just so all of you out there in webinar land know, I have known Śivani now for, I don't know, maybe a couple of years, a few years. And this is how we met, I think. Our conversations
from my podcast.
Right. Our conversations have all been online, similar. And Śivani was very kind to invite me to participate in her podcast. And so we've conversed in this modern way of the world now a few times. And just the other day we were speaking, and that is the conversation to which she was referring. So the transformative effect of coming in contact with someone who can deliver an authentic experience of yoga beyond the superficial stuff of commercial yoga studios and such like that. That started, or that gave you a connection now to a lineage of yoga teachers. So this is not just a one-off. So tell us a little bit about the lineage that you are connected to.
Okay, well, I am initiated as a karma sannyas of the Saraswati lineage through the thread or the tree of Swami Śivananda to his disciple Paramahans Satyananda, who started the Bihar School of Yoga, who then, of course, named his successor as Paramahans Naranjanananda and Paramahans Satya Sangananda of Rikyapit Ashram. So I kind of look at Swami Naranjan and Swami Satsangi, as we belovedly call them, as Sri Swamiji or Paramahans Satyananda's right hand and left hand. He came into this world as one jewel, and he left two flowers when he went. Somebody who can hold an example of absolute beauty of the divine masculine in Swami Naranjan, and somebody who holds so beautifully the exquisiteness of the divine mother in Swami Satsangi. And so I feel utterly privileged to be granted the opportunity to learn at the foot of not one realized being, but at two. And it's really an interesting experience to have been in the presence of Sri Swamiji, of Paramahans Satyananda, before he left his body 2009. And then to continue my training with Swami Satsangi and Swami Naranjan. It's a really beautiful experience.
So, Swami Śivananda traces his connection back to Adi Shankara, who is understood to be an incarnation of Lord Shiva. So, from the standpoint of the distinction now, we have the line of teachings and Vedanta coming from Shankara through his lineage down to Swami Śivananda, and then to your subsequent teachers from there. Cool. So now, karma sannyas is your initiation, and sannyas generally means renunciation. Whereas when we hear about karma yoga in the Bhagavad-gita in the earlier chapters, the assumption is one is engaged with the world, as opposed to turning away from the world as a renunciate. And here we find the two together as karma sannyas, as opposed to sannyas as a pure renunciate. So can you explain a little bit about how that works? How do we put work, action, engagement with the world, and renunciation together?
So a Purna sannyas, or Swami, is somebody traditionally, now, in this modern world, rules are made to be broken, and there's always exceptions to the rule. But traditionally, you would ask a master to bless you with Purna sannyas, with the title of being a Swami. You would then renounce everything, and you would live in the ashram for a minimum of 12 years, which is what Satyananda did at the foot of Swami Śivananda, is that he lived in the ashram with Śivananda for 12 years. And that is considered the traditional sannyas training, is that you would live at the foot of your guru for 12 years. Paramahansaji Satyananda in the 60s, 70s, 80s, as he was fulfilling his mandate that Śivananda gave him of taking yoga door to door and shore to shore, was realizing that there was a level of consciousness that was coming through the modern world that was ready to digest the teachings at a certain level, but did not have the karma to be able to run away to the ashram and not leave it for 12 years. And in that understanding, he started to initiate people as karma sannyas. And so what that means is, in an internal role, I have announced the attachments to the modern world, the desires, all of those karmic things, not karmic things, but all of those things that we get wrapped up into. Both my husband and I have renounced the attachments to them. We have renounced the free will of where we go and what we do. So we were told to move 12 hours inland from Vancouver by land and start a center. This was not my personal desire. I would live in Mexico, be surfing. I am very grateful to be here. It was not my personal whim. It came from something very, very deep inside of me, and then it was mirrored back to me through Swami Satsangi, who gave us the instructions. So I have a mortgage, I have a child, I have a husband, I have a truck loan, I have all of the modern responsibilities, but I do not see them through the eyes of bondage. I do not see them through the same filter as regular uninitiated people. I see them through the eyes as, it is my duty to have these things, to be in service to my guru, and I will fulfill them for that and for that alone.
Got it. So this would be then a renovation of the tradition in order to accommodate the mission of bringing yoga to where it needs to be and establishing your center. And the renunciation sounds to me like what I would understand to be yukta vairagya, that is to say appropriate renunciation in favor of surrender to the mission of one's guru. That sound about right?
Yeah.
Because in our lineage, we also have this idea coming from Sri Chaitanya, the idea that the chanting of the Hari-Krishna mantra should be spread to every town and village. And when my Param Guru, Srila Prabhupada, came to New York, he saw that unlike in India, men and women, young boys, what he called boys and girls, teenagers and young men and women in their 20s, mixed freely together. It was not like India at all. And he had to figure out, well, now young ladies are coming along with these young boys. How am I going to accommodate them? And so his innovation was the Brahmacharini ashram, which just didn't exist normally in the tradition. Ladies were not expected to come and live in the ashram. They would stay with their parents until they married someone who left the ashram to engage in, grihastha life or family life. And when he returned to India and tried to explain this to his godbrothers, they just, they hadn't been to America, so they couldn't really understand,
their heads around it.
Yeah, they couldn't really wrap their heads around it. And his response was, look, you haven't been there, you don't know what it's like. And, if we're going to be successful in fulfilling our guru's mission, then these kind of adjustments have to be made. So that was, you were describing this, which, by the way, just so everyone else knows, was a totally legitimate question from me. We hadn't discussed that earlier. I just let you know I wanted to ask you about it because I really didn't know what the answer to that question
was one of the, not the first, but he was one of the first people that, because women in India have been in the past so repressed and so culturally stagnated. He was one of the first people that insisted on initiating the women and insisted on giving them the teachings and insisted that they take up roles within the ashram that had responsibility. And then, so having Swami Satsangi, believe they call her his Sankalpa Putra. So she is the child of his Sankalpa. He is Niranjan is his Manas Putra, which is the child of his mind.
And you're talking about the ashram in India, right?
I'm talking about the ashram in India right now, Rikya Peet, which is where I go back for training every year. The head Swami is a woman. Mm-hmm. And 4 out of 5 of the next lots of management Swamis are also women. It's a Shakti Peet, and it's really beautiful to see these teachings and these examples of what it is for women to be spiritual, and women to be powerful, and women to be compassionate, and women to be whole. And it's a wonderful example to be surrounded by and interact with. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, it sounds like a very nice example.
Mm-hmm.
This is progressive spiritual life adapting to our contemporary.
You can't have evolution if you're not evolving.
Yes. So now, instead of surfing in Mexico, you're up near, I guess, in the Canadian Rockies.
Yeah, well, actually, we're directly across from the Canadian Rockies. So we are in the foothills of the Purcells, and then there's the Columbia Valley, and then there's the Rockies. So where the ashram sits, we look across the valley to a panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains.
That sounds great.
It's stunning. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful place to be and to live. And
so the name of your ashram is Ishtadev Niwas. Can you tell us what the translation of Ishtadev Niwas is?
I'm sure you could tell me what the translation of Ishtadev Niwas is, but so Ishtadev, as I understand it, well, there's different levels of translation as with many things in Sanskrit. Ishtadev being the favorite form, right? The favorite form of God, Ishta, and Dev being God. So Ishtadev being what is the favorite form of God, and or the chosen form of God, and Niwas meaning home. So we didn't name this property. When we found it, we emailed the ashram back and explained some experiences that we had in finding this, and that it was very auspicious, asking if this was in fact where we should put our energy, and the information came back with yes, and its name is Ishtadev Niwas. So then I emailed back and I said, well, what's the Ishtadev? Like, what form are we offering this to? Like, what form are we building this home for? This was 2012, April, the middle day of Navaratri, so Lakshmi's day of Navaratri. The abundance came and we found the property. And the response came back, Guru, that Guru is the Ishtadev for this land. So for me, that shot right into my heart of hearts, that we were building this so that the light of Paramhansa Satyananda would have a place to touch down. That is my single intention of success. It does not matter to me if anybody's here. It does not matter to me if nobody is here. If there's 20 people here, 1 person here. To be honest, it does not matter to me. What matters to me is if anybody comes here and they can feel the frequency that he embodied, which I directly experienced multiple times. If they can come here and feel that frequency of the Guru Tattva as was brought through Satyananda from Śivananda, from the lineage, then it's fantastic. And so that is what we have aspired to do, is to create a home for that frequency here, so that it can permeate through every tree, every person, every community, every visitor, that they just can feel that frequency of light. And that's my main objective. And I think it's working so far.
All right. Well, that's what you're saying reminds me of a couple of things. From the standpoint of karma yoga, early on in the Gita, Krishna says, work for Vishnu must be performed, otherwise work is binding. And to simply go about one's mission for the sake of pleasing one's guru and the supreme person, Ishvara, is actually how the success of one's activities is measured. In our lineage also, this same idea is conveyed that, you know, the reason for doing what we do is for the pleasure of Krishna. And the results are not up to us. As long as our intention is to please Krishna, then that's what counts. And if someone comes, if we have, say, a place, as you have a place, a niwas, a home. Many hotels actually are called niwas, something niwas in India.
It could be
your home.
Slightly.
Well, it gives you a sense of, you know, this is also your home. But yes, when we essentially put the invitation out there for people to come, to hear transcendental knowledge, to experience transcendental knowledge, to engage in transcendental work, then even if no one comes, as long as what we are doing is intended to fulfill the mission of our guru in pursuance of pleasing the Supreme Person, then our activities are considered successful. And then the other thing I was thinking about when you were speaking is the verse at the end of the Shvetasvatara Upanishad. For one who has faith in one's guru the same as in the Supreme Lord, then the meaning of this Upanishad is illuminated from within the heart.
Well, it was a completely magical experience. I mean, my name, Shivani, is, you know, as is said to me, is what Shiva calls Parvati when he's in a good mood with her. And it's always been described to me as another name for Durga. And of course, Durga is the fearless one, which would really coincide because my anxiety levels have throughout my entire life had been just off the charts. I mean, I was the definition of chicken shit. And because to try and get this property, like on a third dimensional level, like Swami Satsang is like, go and get, you know, find land and build a center. And I'm like, with all due respect, you're enlightened or you're nuts, because we have no money. BC, British Columbia, means bring cash. Like we don't have, I mean, my husband's a nurse. I'm a yoga teacher. We're not flush people. And then of course that voice in the back of your head that says, Shivani, shut up and do as you're told. And just, you know, go and keep chanting and just don't worry about the details. Do not worry about it. If Swami Satsangi, if Sri Swamiji wants land will come. And so it was so magical because she had said, Shivani, you don't have enough money. You'll have to lease it until you can buy it. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. When we found this property, we were looking for property about 5-6 acres. We thought would be a really good size for a little center. But on the middle of day of Lakshmi of Navaratri, this property came to us through a friend of the night before, and it was 40 acres. And when Swami Satsangi had said, you know, do you have land yet? And we were like, no, Swamiji, we don't. And we still own our apartment in Vancouver, and the market has crashed and we've lost like basically everything, maybe saved 30 grand out of it. And, you know, like we're not really in good spots. She said, go home, sell the apartment, find land in Paramjyoti, quit your job and go to casual nursing. And she said, don't teach for that summer, just build. And I'm like, okay, you know, all 3 of those instructions happened in 24 hours. The apartment sold within 24 hours of it going on the market to a woman in West Bengal who has never seen it.
That's pretty amazing.
it just was mind blowing. And then I'm standing in the supermarket crying to my husband because we've got a written offer on the apartment like 24 hours later, within 24 hours of putting it on the market. And he's like, oh, I just quit my job and went back to casual. I'm like, we didn't discuss this. And then I called my other friend to tell her we just sold the apartment. She's like, oh, this person said that they want to sell land privately to the right people for the right price. You should go look at it. So the next day we went and looked at it, and he was like, well, you don't have enough money for bare land in BC because you need like 50% down and blah, 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 blah. He's like, why don't you lease it for 30 grand for 2 years and then build and then use the equity to get your down payment for the mortgage? And I was like,
and that was the explanation now of what it meant to lease before you buy, because you don't have enough money.
And it all happened. And so we moved on with a 12-foot camper, a portaloo, a 2-year-old, and 2 dogs. There was no well, no buildings, just a bare road into the middle of 40 acres in the middle of nowhere. And we had no money because all of the money had gone to the lease. And we got up every morning at 6 a.m. and we did a havan of the Satyananda Gayatri. And that's what we did. That was my full focus of trust, of that it will come, and just donations and people. And then one of our students sold a business and wrote a check for an amount, and just everything started arriving. Really, it was the most magical and exhausting 6 months.
I'll bet. So just so everyone here with us knows, a havan is a fire sacrifice. Is that my understanding? Is explain to us what your havan consisted of.
So I always think of sacrifice like killing animals.
No. Yagya.
Sometimes, yagya, that can happen, not here. A havan is a small scale yagya where the sacrifice of the 5 elements, so water, air, ether, fire, and earth, put into a kund, which is an upside down pyramid shape. So it's square at the top and it goes down to a point, with mantra and samagri, which is all the herbs. And we actually make our own samagri here of the wild herbs, and all of the natural medicines from the land gets offered into the havan. And so it's a combination of alchemy, of transforming each of the elements through the power of mantra into a force field that is absorbed by the land and raises the frequency and the consciousness of everything that it touches. So it's a very powerful practice, and it's one of our main practices here.
Cool. And this is an amazing story that serves as an example of the power of faith and what can happen when one's faith supports this level of surrender, which frankly I find pretty extraordinary.
Because my teacher wrote me a Christmas birthday card one year, and you expect to open it up and it say, happy birthday, Śivani. It literally wrote, surrender is not a 4-lettered word. Because surrender was just not in my vocabulary. You do not.
And it's not in most of our vocabularies.
No.
We associate it with defeat and weakness, right? And this is something that I've spoken about in one of our earlier Gita classes when Krishna speaks about Jagya. And I have, one of the things we did speak about is, Swami Śivananda has a commentary on Bhagavad-gita, translation and commentary, which one can find online. It's just there for free. And so I took a look at his translation and his commentary, and I wanted to ask you a few things, seeing as his commentary is coming from a slightly different angle. And this goes directly to the point of Jagya and mantra, which you've told me is your personal practice and part of what you just described for us. So in his commentary, speaking now about verses we've just covered in the 10th chapter. Swami Śivananda says, repetition of mantra is regarded as the best of all jagyas, or sacrifices. This is from the verse where Krishna speaks about how of sacrifices he is japa, repetition, and of sounds he is the transcendental syllable om. Swami Śivananda continues, there is no loss or injury in this jagya. Manu, this is one of the ancient, referring to one of the ancient Vedic texts. Whatever else Brahman may or may not do, he attains salvation. Whatever else the Brahman, meaning a spiritually enlightened practitioner, whatever else the Brahman may or may not do, he attains salvation by japa alone. So the japa, the repetition of transcendental sound, according to Swami Śivananda, is sufficient for the attainment of liberation, freedom from material entanglement. So in this chapter, Krishna speaks about how he is the transcendental sound, Om, and that of sacrifices, he is japa. And Patanjali also speaks about this in his Yoga Sutras, how Om is synonymous with Ishvara, and the japa, the repetition of Om, and the meditation on its meaning, the contemplation of its significance as the sound representation of Ishvara, should be performed. So can you speak a little bit about your meditation practice and how repetition and contemplation of transcendental sound affects your consciousness? Clearly, we have seen the example of how it is transforming your situation, and how your morning program spiritualizes the atmosphere of where you are. So can you speak a little bit about how that practice spiritualizes your inner environment as well as your outer environment?
My inner environment. Well, in my experience, I can honestly say that I have never experienced anything so transformative as mantra. I have a personal guru mantra, which I aspire to do with every step, with every action. If I'm in action and I'm silent, or for example, I'm not teaching, then I aspire to be chanting mentally my guru mantra. But in our lineage, it's very stressed that not only your guru mantra is very important, that there are other mantras that are very important for creating a frequency and a container of light to help people move through their day in the modern world and in the ashram. My experience with Sri Swamiji, with Paramahansa Satyananda, who lived with Shivananda, was that when he did the Panchagni sadhana, which is the 5 fires, he did that for 5 years. From Makar Sankranti, which I believe is the 14th of January, until Guru Purnima in July. For 5 years, he would sit in the 5 fires. And I think it was, now don't quote me on this, but I think it was like year 2 or year 3 that he got an additional instruction from the divine that he needed to engage with his Guru mantra, which was the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, every breath, 24 hours a day. So he committed to doing 108 lakh.
All right. So now I think you need to define some of your terms.
Okay.
So the Mahamrityunjaya mantra is a Shiva mantra.
Yes, it is.
And I often chant that mantra in my yoga classes and workshops when that day is someone's birthday.
Oh, really?
Yes. I'll let you explain about the mantra, but you can understand why, on a birthday,
yes.
one would chant this particular mantra. This is, anyway, And then lakh. Now we're counting in Indian.
Right. So 108 lakh, I believe, is 1,080,000 repetitions.
Mm-hmm.
Which meant he had to do a repetition of the Mahamrityunjaya every 13 seconds.
Now that's smoking. That's like really...
There was literally, he did not go to the bathroom. He would sit for 12 hours a day and he would chant from dawn until dusk, because for the Panchagni, you needed the sun, right? So from when the sun came up to when the sun went down, he would literally sit with no food, no getting up, no breaks, no nothing. And he would sit and he would chant. And it was during this sadhana that Lakshmi Devi came to him and said, you have a blank check. Anything you think of from this moment forward, you will get, so long as not a penny is for your personal well-being. And he sat in Anand for the rest of his life, and that is the being that I met and that I experienced. And from a 26-year-old white Western woman who had done her 600-hour teacher training and was like going to India, and it was going to be so much fun, and I was going to learn something and go to a bona fide ashram, and I went into this presence of this really pale Indian dude, because he was like 80 years old and he didn't get out much and he didn't speak to people anymore, and he was not really, he was not he didn't care if you were there or not.
Well, he was doing his own thing.
He was totally doing his own thing. But when you sat in his presence, there was nothing. You couldn't even formulate a thought. You were so heard before you even spoke. You were felt before you even moved. Nothing existed. It was the strangest and the most beautiful experience of my life. So far, the first time I was ever in his presence, because I was one of 50 people in the room. There was nothing special about me. He never spoke to me. He never looked at me directly that I saw. I mean, he sort of gazed around, but there was nothing like, you were called out or anything. No, nothing. And I walked out of there going, I have never experienced such pure love. And that love was not to me, but it was emanating from him. And it was to everything, everybody. And his embodiment of that frequency, which I call love, consciousness, light, whatever you want to call it, was so unconditional. There was no doubt in my mind that being in front of me, that old man, had attained the height of human potential. That's the only way I could describe it. And I was like, what the hell are we doing? What are we doing with all of this consumerism, with the way we're treating the earth? What are we doing with all of this, trying to get the better cars and the bigger houses and the vacations and all of the stuff? He doesn't need any of that.
Yes.
He's very happy.
And this is why it's so important to gain the association of spiritually advanced people.
It is.
Because to have that kind of experience, to experience someone in that state of being has a very, very profound effect on our consciousness and makes us realize what's possible for a human being who is touched by divine grace to attain.
And just being in his presence, you could feel that I could never be the same. It was like the Matrix, when Neo's like red pill, blue pill.
Right. The choice. Yeah. Now you have to make a choice.
You can't go back.
It's very difficult. Spiritual life has a way of ruining your material life.
Completely ruined everything.
So yeah, it's pretty hard to go back. Let's go back, however, to the Mahamrityunjana mantra itself. I would be hard pressed to chant it in 13 seconds if I did it as fast as I could. I suppose with practice, one could do it that quickly. But would you just elaborate? I know when I looked on the website, and your morning program includes the chanting of this mantra. Mm-hmm. So could you tell us about this mantra and just what, how it goes, what the translation is, and elaborate a little bit on its significance?
Okay, well, it goes, Om Trayambakam Yajame Sugandim Pushtivaranam Mudva Rukamiva Pandanat Mrityo Mokshya Mamritat.
Okay. Swaha. Yes, Swaha.
Swaha. So it goes like that. Now, there are translations on Google. I don't like translations. I never teach translations.
Well, then tell us what you understand the meaning to be.
What do I understand? Okay, so I understand it as it is the mantra to Shiva, which we consider the one of the ultimate mantras for healing, health, and prosperity. In that all healing is the destruction of ignorance. And that is the root of healing. It's not about physical health, but it is for actual healing. And that health is a byproduct of healing. So when you come into vidya, right, rather than avidya, that when the ignorance is dissipated, which of course is the symbolism of what Shiva is, then the expanded consciousness, the expanded awareness, the understanding beyond this moment, beyond this lifetime, beyond time, allows you to sit in health, whether you are physically healthy or not. It doesn't matter, because once the consciousness is no longer tied to the identification with the ego in this reality as being the be all and end all, then that is a state of healing. So that mantra has the power to liberate the consciousness from the bounds of this, the karmic ties of this reality of the avidya, of it being such a small package.
All right, thank you very much. Does that work for you? Yeah, it does.
Yeah, can you expand on that? Or do you have anything different?
Well, no, I defer to you. I chant the mantra on occasion, and I certainly, that's why I can't chant it as smoothly and as quickly as you can, because it's part of your regular practice. It's not, it's
morning.
It's the exceptional part of my practice. And therefore I have to defer more to translations and my understanding of the translations rather than my personal realization of it.
It goes on about like cutting the cucumber from the three-eyed vine or whatever.
Yes, may my departure from this body be just like a ripe cucumber falling off the vine.
Going from the vine. Yeah. But
there are a couple of interesting ironies I find in this mantra, insofar as Shiva is described as the fragrant one. Which, when you consider he hangs out in crematoriums, that, you know, that's goes to the point of the power of Lord Shiva, that he can do that and still be transcendentally fragrant, and that he is in charge of the quality of ignorance, and yet we can go to him to dispel our ignorance. And the idea that, yes, that is the ultimate healing, because all dis-ease rolls back to the condition of not seeing, vidya, our true nature. So avidya, the absence of light that therefore prevents us from being able to see. Exactly. So anyway, yes, I like your take on it very much.
Mantras are they're quantum physics. They're frequencies. that our nature, our innate nature, loves to calibrate to.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm teaching mantra, I really try to emphasize that when we chant mantra, that it's the frequency and the feeling of it is way more important than the literal translation. Because really what you're trying to do is you're trying to remember, right? Because these mantras are not something we do to conjure from the outside to bring into us. We are these mantras. All of the mantras, all of the Vedic and Tantric mantras that we practice are combinations of the essence of who we are. And so when we chant them, we are actually waking up those pieces inside of ourselves to bubble to the surface in a really beautiful and organic, natural kind of way. And so it's about remembrance, bringing the pieces of ourselves back into something that can shine forth, rather than the West is always looking for a pill from the outside.
Right. No, that's a very good way.
Calibrating from the inside.
Right. Now, I think that's a very good way to explain it and to put it into perspective. Because yes, from the West, we are looking for a cure out there that we can put in here, as opposed to awakening what is already in here. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about this in connection with the Hari-Krishna mantra. Mm-hmm. And that's a very nice way to understand the Hari-Krishna mantra from the tradition of Krishna Bhakti, that the literal translation, it's just alternating feminine, masculine names of the divine, of the supreme person. But the understanding of its meaning is that it is a request for the benediction to be engaged in service to Krishna and to have that service be motivated by love. And philosophically, that's our actual natural spiritual condition, is to be love itself and express ourselves through acts of devotion. So sadhana bhakti means you practice it when you don't feel it, and raganuga bhakti means you feel it in your practice. The practice is the same, but the feeling of the same offering of love changes, because you go from practicing love to experiencing love to being
embodying
an embodiment of love. So anyway, so I thought it was just very, very nice how you explain mantra as a process of, that the mantra itself tells us who we are. And that the chanting of the mantra reacquaints us with our true identity.
Exactly.
And the forgetfulness of that identity being the very avidya that we were speaking about earlier.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see, we have a little bit of time left, and we have scratched the surface of the list that I sent to you of topics we would talk about and questions.
Yeah.
So yes, my prediction that we would not actually get very, very far into our list has come to pass. So this is fine, because that means we will have plenty to talk about next time we do this in a later chapter. What I want to, since now I also thought by now that I would have closed out the 10th chapter and be transitioning into the 11th chapter. So I actually still have a few more verses to go, which I'm going to cover next week. And when we spoke leading up to this, you told me about how this particular chapter in the Bhagavad-gita has significance for you. And I just would like to hear a little bit about your reflections of this chapter as Krishna gives Arjuna all the different ways or actually from Krishna's standpoint, just some of the many possible ways that Arjuna can remember him and meditate on him through different aspects of nature, you know, elements of the phenomenal world. Can you just tell us a little bit about your take on the 10th chapter?
My take on it, I think the 10th chapter is actually my favorite, because I'm a lover of life, and as a teacher, there's so many different ways, so many different people come across my path, so many different people with different backgrounds, of different religions, and different patternings, and different woundings, and different experiences. And I love the polytheicism of Tantra and Vedanta, in that there is something for everybody. It's not about what you worship. It's the act of worshiping gets you closer to the experience of the divine, rather than what it is. So you want to, you know, I think it's the Gayatri mantra. So chant the Gayatri mantra. You fall in love with Ram. So love Ram. You love Shiva. So love Shiva. You know, like Krishna says, I am Shiva, I am Ram, I am Krishna, I am Japa, I am, you know, everything. There's something for everybody. It's not that I was brought up very Catholic, and so it's not this like, this is the way to God. This is the way that you have to mold yourself into to be able to be accepted by the divine. I love that this chapter is encouraging not what you have to love, but your willingness to love, your willingness to explore, your willingness to be attracted to something, and then acknowledging that attraction as Krishna or the Supreme Being is the point, not what it is. You know what I mean? And I love that, because I'm a Gemini. I really couldn't choose. Right? I'm like, I chant to Durga. I totally love the Ramacharita Manas. I have like a complete crush on Hanuman. My Shiva's my husband. You know, like I got a lot going on. And at the end of the day, all I see is my guru's feet. All I see is his feet, and all I hear is the name. And that's really what it boils down to for me. But nothing needs to be rejected.
One of the things I did early on in this series is speak about how, at least from my perspective, the Bhagavad-gita is not a Hindu scripture. It is a scripture of universal religious principles or spiritual principles that is meant to bring about religious experience. And I spoke at some length about how we understand the word religion in relationship to yoga as meaning to heal by binding back to the source, rather than, you know, being a religion. You know, one of the wonderful manifestations and expressions of your experience of love is the destination for all the funds that come in when someone purchases your book. So in the last couple of minutes that we have, would you please speak about this very, very wonderful organization that you support with sales from your book?
Okay, so Atma Seva is run by a Guru Didi of mine. She is an English woman who I've never met, called Atma Tatwa. And I met her over Facebook. That does not sound credible. But I was in Vancouver teaching. I was staying at one of my students' house. I was sleeping in her little nook of a study. And I was lying in bed at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was scrolling through, and I saw this plea from this woman, Atma Tatwa, who's from our lineage, who was trying to raise some funds for refurbishing a school it had had some flooding or something, and all of the mats on the floor were ruined. There was no posters on the walls, and the kids didn't have any shoes, and so she was asking if anybody felt inspired to please help her get the money to do this. And when I read that, I looked up, and there was this huge poster of Swami Niranjan on the wall, looking at me, going, you're having a very successful time, you know, in Vancouver. You need to help with that. And so I sent her some of the funds from my Vancouver trip to help do that school. And then I started to talk to her about what she was doing and why was she there, and how did she get there. And I started to learn about her efforts, and this woman is just phenomenal of what she's doing. She runs an ashram for the elderly. She sponsors widows. She pays for college scholarships for girls. She will trek with 2-3 doctors 3-4 days into the back of the Himalayas with huge boxes of medications, and runs medical camps in the absolute nowhere. And I said, you know, I want to be part of what you're doing. I can't get on a plane right now. I'm running Niwas, but let me help you in whatever way I can. So we started sponsoring one of the women, one of the widows that she was helping. And when I wrote the Yoga of Remembrance, it's a very personal book, and it's an encapsulation of a chapter in my life that I really wanted the courage to stand behind and to honor and to put out for people to connect to. But it's not something that I have already benefited from it. Who I am today is all I need to benefit from what is in that book. So I wanted to offer all of the money, any money that I receive from any purchases of this book is going directly to Atma Tattva to support her in the work that she's doing. And I'm really excited to say that we've already raised over $1,000, and it's really, really exciting what she's doing. We've helped pay for some hospitalizations of children that got very, very sick, and they were from the slums in Rishikesh, and they needed hospitalization and antibiotics and IV antibiotics, and we were able to pay for all of their hospitalizations and get them back home with their family. And she's just doing amazing work, and so that
sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for supporting such a wonderful endeavor. So The Yoga of Remembrance by Śivani Howe is her book, and it is available on Amazon. And are there any other places where one can find your book, or Goodreads, such like that?
No, not really. Just Amazon. That was like a big step for me, as it
Right.
was. I have physical copies that I can post to people. You can message me through the website, but Amazon on Kindle and printed. And
the website is Ishtadev Niwas.ca up in Canada. And please go and check out the website. It's a very robust website. There's a lot there. There's podcasts. There's so many resources. And to find Atma Seva, the charity that Śivani is speaking about, you can go to Facebook and look for Atma Seva 108. And that is where you will find this very nice project. And if anyone has any questions for Śivani, we are already over our usual time, but if anyone has any questions, now's a good time to ask them. You can, I assume you can contact, and people can contact you through the website, so if they want to ask you a question directly. Śivani, so you can, they can contact you through the website?
Yeah, they can absolutely contact me through the website. Send a message through the contact page. Yeah.
Very good. All right. And as always, if there are any questions after the fact that you would like to direct to me, Hari at Hari-kirtana.com is the place to be. Next week, we will conclude the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. We will speak on verses 36 through 42. Morality, victory, silence, and wisdom are the topics that Krishna will be speaking on in relationship to himself. We will also take a look at Krishna's various expansions and incarnations. So break out your notebook and be ready to take notes on charts so you can trace that all out. And we will conclude with how Krishna tells Arjuna that he is pervading everything with just a tiny spark of his splendor. So, Śivani, thank you so very, very much for taking the time to hang out with me here and with everyone here in the Satsang. I'm very, very grateful to have you here, and I look forward to doing this again with you sometime.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. All right, and for everyone else, I look forward to seeing you next time. It's always a great pleasure for me to be here with you, and an honor to have you here with me. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Namo Narayana.
Hare Krishna.